Want to go ahead and hit record. I have 4 o'clock, but we'll give people. In order for it not to drive you all crazy, we'll give everyone a minute or two to come on in before we get started. I really do appreciate you all giving up your time and energy for this conversation. We'll start in 1 minute. All right. Well, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. I am Willis Walter. I'm the Dean of the College of Education at the Great Virginia State University, the institution that sits high above the Appomattox River. I am excited because today I have the opportunity to moderate a fantastic panel discussion with some of our terrific group of superintendents. We have a lot of fantastic superintendents, and if I had the chance to invite many more on, I could have doubled this number very easily from some of the partnerships and some of the work that we've done over the last few years. However, we were trying to get a good representation of the Commonwealth, both North, South, East, and West. And of course, with Petersburg being in our backyard, we have Dr. Maria Petrie Martin. We have Dr. Merv Darty from Chesterfield County Schools. We have Dr. Gordon, and Dr. Gordon is from Suffolk City Public Schools. And last but of course not least, we have our very own Virginia State University grad in Dr. Rosa Atkins, Superintendent of Charlottesville City Schools. And so welcome everyone. I am so excited about this conversation, large and in part because I don't know if a lot of our teachers, a lot of our parents, a lot of our in-service educators have had the opportunity of hearing straight from you some of the things that you are thinking about, some of the things that you're proud about, some of the things that you are doing in the midst of this pandemic. COVID-19 kind of hit us somewhat off guard, and a number of you all had to pivot very quickly. And so the first question now I have, and we'll have a series of a couple of questions, and please jump in where you would like. Where are you as far as dealing with the pandemic, and what are the lessons learned from your time during this COVID-19 transition? Who would like to go first? Dr. Darty, would you like to go first?
I think we all could spend about an hour each on lessons learned. One is be very flexible every minute of your life right now. But I think many of my colleagues, as we discussed, talked about the needs of our families as we've gone through this, especially with technology and access. When you think about all of us have been involved with serving meals to our families constantly over the past 11 months, sure that we had internet access to hotspots, to technology, everything that was needed to, even before we started to teach, to make sure our children were ready to move forward. And I think, I hate to say this, but the pandemic probably helped us somewhat become stronger in the technology field. When you look at all the needs of our faculty and our students and our families. The other thing I think that we realized is that how our educators are in being mobile and be able to pivot at any time to go from face to face to virtual to hybrid. You think of all the methods that we're trying to implement into helping our children. The one thing that we can't forget are the teachers who have spent probably twice as much time daily in preparing lessons and getting ready to move forward. Um, and they're just some of the things that I know that we've looked at, we've learned into, we've leaned into. Uh, but I think everyone that I've spoken with has looked at the technology side of it and how do we bring an equalization, an equity piece to our students, especially knowing that we have families that will stay virtual not only this year but probably next year.
And you've also been able to do some fundraising and campaigning to raise some funds. In addition to that,
Right.
can you talk
We were able
just
to
a
work
tad bit
with
about that?
we worked with our foundation. We raised a little over $400,000 we bought over 2,100 hotspots, and we had almost 1,300 internet access for Comcast letters to go out. So, and then we were able to initially detect additional technology assistance for not our students and staff members. So we were very thankful for the opportunities we had to go out and speak to foundations and community partners to raise money, and the access goes all the way through 2022, and we are still offering internet access and hotspots to families as they move in, as they need to. You know, some of our families are still losing their jobs, and we want to make sure that they have access to that, as well as teachers that need access.
Dr. Atkins?
Yeah, you know, I think we learned that we can do more than we thought we could do. COVID is doesn't discriminate. It is serious, it is deadly, and the fear that it caused was across all sectors of our community. Although in the Black community, there were more deaths, there have been more hospitalizations, more COVID cases. COVID itself is a deadly disease, causes fear. And we've learned that even in the face of that kind of fear, that we have teachers and staff who are so committed to our students, to our families, that they can rise to that occasion in the midst of all of this. But I think something else we've learned is that where we thought there were inequities, there really are. And we used to talk about it and we used to theorize about it. But during 2020, when COVID hit, it started to uncover all of those inequities and it came forth in a gush. And I think we realize more than ever, there is an imperative in public education that we immediately address the inequities. And those are inequities of access. Those are inequities of the distribution of the resources that are necessary to have access, and whether that's access to the written material, the taught material, healthcare. There are all sorts of inequities that are being uncovered as we start to go through this. I mean, as we start to grapple with all of the consequences of COVID. We've also learned that our students are resilient, and flexibility is what all of us have to have in order to navigate these troubled waters.
I was just going to ask, what systems are you all using, both in Charlottesville as well as in Chesterfield? And are you
Big
pleased
Bird and
with
I have
those
the same
results?
thing. We have Canvas.
Yeah.
Yeah, we use the student a learning management system, Canvas,
Mhm.
and we also have devices that all of our students have, and we have I like to say 99.9% connectivity with our students and our families.
And Dr. Petrie Martin or Dr. Gordon?
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'll certainly jump in here. We have Schoology as our learning management system. And of course, we made that decision just based on economics for us here in Petersburg. But I have to ditto a lot of what was stated by the other superintendents. But I'm going to take it maybe in a little bit of a different direction, because I think as division leaders, we have probably learned a lot about ourselves during this process as well. I have a lot of my colleagues who have chosen to retire in the midst of what's been happening. So it has stretched us, I think, as leaders personally. And I think for myself, I have learned that you have to be your authentic self in the midst of a crisis, because people will know if you're not. And we really, really have to work hard on leading from that authentic self, because a crisis can cause you to make decisions that are not authentic if you're not centered in what your beliefs are about education, and also about children. So I think we've all learned a lot about ourselves and will continue to learn. But I would also add, from an organizational perspective, your weakest areas in an organization are highlighted during a pandemic. And so what you have to do is figure out very quickly what those weak areas are, and then enhance those areas very quickly. For us in Petersburg City Public Schools, it had to do with communication. It had to do with having accurate contact information for all of our families. We are a community that is very close knit. So our families were very used to showing up at the school if they had a question, or we would wait to see the parent in the parent pickup line if we had a question for them. Well, those things were no longer possible during COVID-19. So we had to figure out different ways of communicating with our families. So we have learned a lot, and we have come a long way in that area. But the other area has to do with equity. Very often when you're in a school division where the majority of the students might be of one specific race, you think, well, is there really a need to address equity? And there's even more of a need to address equity, because within our community, we know that we don't have an equitable educational system. So we have had to do many of the things that were shared, with hotspots, with devices, with instructional materials in the home. And I'm very happy to say that we are almost at the same, at 99.9 of our families have devices now in the home. They have broadband internet access in the home, and they actually have instructional materials that are hands-on that our parents can learn with their students. So we've learned a lot about ourselves and a lot about our organizations as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And Dr. Gordon?
I definitely would like to also echo a lot of the things that my colleagues said. You kind of look at this, when schools closed on March 13, 2020, the first question that we all asked ourselves is, how can we continue learning? Or basically, what are we going to do? And you have to think about things from both your elementary and secondary level of how you can properly close out the school year, especially keeping the end in the mind with the seniors of the graduating class of 2020, to make sure they had everything they needed to complete the year so they were eligible to graduate. As you move into phase two for your summer planning, besides what everyone mentioned about already feeding our students, what is your summer school model going to look like? We at that time, we all were basically in the same boat as trying to be as safe as possible, because there wasn't as much information out about the pandemic. We all knew about the mitigation strategies. Because of that, almost all of us had to remain virtual. So the summer school model, as well as planning for whatever was going to happen in the fall, definitely was the whole goal that we were all looking at for the summer. And then moving into phase three, you think about how can you start your school year off? Because the professional learning that you really had to put into place for your teachers was the thing that I'm sure a lot of school divisions struggled with. But a lot of staff members were so nervous about teaching virtual and making sure that you gave them all the supports, because a lot of our teachers, I'm sure, wanted to try to fit in what they would normally do in the brick and mortar setting in a virtual setting. And that also meant my elementary teachers, for example, getting away from using so much paper and making everything digital. That was a huge lift for us. And so now, as you look at it, now we're all preparing, not all of us are like, Dr. Doherty, who had already had some students back into the building. Now we're preparing for sending kids back and making sure that not only have you been looking at that social emotional learning level the entire time, but you also have to take a look at the overall comfort level of your staff. I had some teachers that resigned just because this was something new. And for some reason in education, change is always hard, especially when it comes to dealing with something that no one has, any research on, the books on. And that was something that Dr. Doherty and I were kind of joking about before we really got started. I started this job in October of 2019 and the pandemic hit in March of 2020. So I had 5 quote unquote normal months. But now, because our staff is really used to the virtual learning, now how are we going to get them used to having 2-part lessons that have virtual and some hybrid components? Even though accreditation is in ways going to be the focus and making sure that everything, not only to address the learning loss, but also to bridge to prepare for this.
Well, you also had some things that you were already challenged with special education and STEM. How has that affected, or how has the pandemic affected some of those already challenges in your community?
I think that's really important, Dr. Walter, because providing the services that we're currently listing in the IEPs is going to be a and having communication with the parents and getting them to understand that we're going to have to make some adjustments. We have virtual IEP meetings to do that, just to get parents to understand that we're going to have to look at services in a different way and still try to be able to provide the support to you. Regarding STEM, one of the things I did, I actually partnered with one of our Civil Air Patrol units. We bought a lot of, bridges and airplanes and other things that could be done specifically at the middle school level. And we were also trying to get them involved in potentially looking at JRTC or the Civil Air Patrol itself, but also to kind of break up the monotony. After a while, the kids were kind of getting tired of the virtual learning model. So you had to do some things different because, our goal is to try to make sure we were engaging as much as we possibly could with active engaged lessons, but you still need to do some things differently. We established a routine, but what can we do to make sure these kids are involved? They're turning on their cameras. They're doing whatever we can to make sure that the teacher can kind of do a daily wellness check. So the STEM piece is key because the kids are a lot more resilient, as Dr. Atkins mentioned. The kids were very resilient in being able to adjust to the virtual learning model. And in some cases, they actually had better technological skills than the staff did. They're kind of coming up with something that they both could kind of lay their hands on, so that everyone could be on the same page. It's probably something we're working on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for that. Let me say to our audience that you can share in your questions in the chat area of this Zoom call, and we will try to bring some closure to the conversation with some of your questions at the end. And we'll try to monitor that. Dr. Bazemore will be monitoring the chat area for those questions. So please share your questions in that area. The next question really is a pivot off of that last one, which is how is what you've learned going to be shown in what you do after the pandemic? What are some of the things that you're going to be able to demonstrate or do differently post-pandemic from what you did either during the pandemic or prior to COVID-19 hitting us? Dr. Peachy Martin, would you like to share first?
Sure, I don't mind sharing at all, because we have discovered that for many of our students, virtual learning is actually a benefit to them. We have heard from parents and from students that they have appreciated the opportunity to learn virtually for a lot of different reasons. So in Petersburg City Public Schools, we are considering a permanent Petersburg Virtual Academy. That will always be an option for our families, which is something new and different for our community. Also, when we started the school year, we were going to have social emotional learning curriculum that was going to be taught in our schools every single day. There was a consideration to steer away from that because we started virtually, but we continued and we have now built momentum. So to be honest with you, we can't imagine a core curriculum that doesn't have an SEL curriculum as part of it. So we will continue to do that when we return face-to-face as well. And the third component of this is our parents and our community members' involvement now in our in their children's education has really grown, and we can't go backwards. We just can't, because now they are active and now they are involved. You know, for the first time, we have 100+ attendance at our school board meetings. We can't go backwards. People want to know what's happening. So our level of communication and making sure that our parents and our community members are involved in education will continue. As I told the teachers when we started this process, now you have everybody watching you teach. And because everybody is watching you teach, your preparedness has to be at a totally different level. And they have risen to the occasion. So we have to keep that going with more community walks, where we bring the community into our schools to be able to see what is truly going on. And this is done consistently throughout the school year. So these are all things that we know we have to keep doing. We can't go backwards.
Thank you. Dr. Atkins?
Now, Dr. Petrie Martin, I want to just say yes. Those are the things that we want to continue. We do data walks and data talks in Charlottesville, and we had some data talks this morning. And one of the schools that we were talking with, one of the team members said, you know, there has, before we went to the COVID learning, there was distance learning, but the students were face to face and they were a distance away from the learning. So distance learning has been there. What virtual learning has helped us to do is close that distance, ironically. It has brought the families closer to us and the students individually closer to their teachers and closer to the teams. And this particular school, they developed family coaches. So everyone is a coach for not only the student, but for the families. So we'll never go back from that. We'll make sure that's in place. Access, internet access. As we have gone about with the team developing the budget, I will never develop a budget without having a line item to continued internet access at the 99.9%. That is a necessity. For student success, the parents are able to see and access information about their student. So having students have access, having a device. Our little ones need the devices, not only in school, but also in their homes. We will never go back from our students to our students not having devices in their homes. That's a necessity. We also know that our students, as Dr. Petrie Martin mentioned, they need that social emotional support. And they're going to need it even more when they come in. So in developing the budget, we have put in a social emotional counselor type for each of our schools so that they will be there. So those are how we look at our children, our students, and our staff and what their needs are, shifting our focus on making sure that the supplies, the supports, and the access are always there in place for students and for families.
I would think snow days are going to be treated totally different now as well. Dr. Gordon or Dr. Daugherty?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the snow day piece because that became a hot topic last week, you know, and even though we only had a 2-hour delay, I was kind of doing little budget faculty meetings virtually, and I let them know that, you know, technically inclement weather days will go away unless it's a power outage or a safety issue. And that was a turning point for a lot of our staff to really be able to understand that. And some of them actually, you know, contacted us and said, well, having a snow day is normal, and that's all right. Well, there's nothing normal about a snow day. And if we're serious about, discussing learning loss, every hour, every day really counts. And one of the things that Dr. Peachy Martin said is, we also, in our next year calendar, we actually have designated, virtual learning days. And I'm going to try to pilot it first. Looks very, very similar to our, Educating Innovators, our hybrid instructional model right now. But to try to have one of those one per semester, and then maybe in the following year, one per quarter. And to really, if we continue to focus on project-based learning and some other things, by that time, our students and teachers should really be used to it. So, that's the positives that has come out of this, because when we first started to give Chromebooks to our primary age students, the parents' first inclination was, well, these young kids can't do that. How are you expect them to be on the computer? Well, they're playing video games and they're doing other things. It really was second nature for them. And I think people were kind of surprised that even kids 4, 5, 6 years old, because we gave them to our pre-K students as well, did a great job of really navigating that on a daily basis.
Great to hear. Dr. Daugherty?
Almost like all of our colleagues are thinking the same thing. And so a great thing about Virginia, we share a lot of information. We put a document together for Project Restart, and we talked about the importance of learning loss. And we'd already planned to make sure full summer school for the next 3 years, K to 12. It was interesting. We had 16,000 students do virtual summer school, which was interesting. But I think it's gonna take 3 to 5 years with our children working 12 months a year. The other thing that that you've heard before is that we are going to introduce a virtual academy K to 12. We know that there'll be students in our summer and in the next school year that want to stay virtual. And I would agree with the colleagues that some of our students have excelled because there's no distractions. And our parents are really enjoying that. And then there are parents who are not enjoying this. And so I think we're in a place in our country where we're going to have options for everyone. And we are working very hard in our social and emotional learning. Last year, we added additional counselors to our schools. And again, this year, looking at additional counselors to make sure that we meet the needs, because there's going to be a high need. There's trauma. There's a lot of issues out there that we are going to have to address head on. And I did hear the term distance learning. And one thing we learned on equity is that, we have 65 schools. And so we know at our high schools level, at 11 high schools, that not all classes are taught in all schools. So our principals are working now on example, if you were at a school that didn't have AP biology classes, but John's school did have AP biology classes, now we can teach the classes through different schools. So one school could teach students in 10 other different schools. So we're very excited about that. That's something that, is a benefit from where we had to move in technology to make sure that look at some of the weaknesses that the systems have, and we can never go back to the normal that we were in earlier last year. We have to continue to move forward. As long as we continue to push the envelope, we're going to create a great educational system outside of this pandemic.
I'm so glad you said that. Go ahead, Dr. Atkins.
I want to make a comment about the continuation of the virtual learning. There is a Senate Bill 1303, that's in the General Assembly that's moving through right now. And that bill actually will, if it continues and it gets to the governor's desk, it will require school divisions to offer both face-to-face and virtual education. Now, there are a lot of implications with that. But I think we can take the best of what we've learned during this time and apply it in the virtual setting and what we know about good instruction and good teaching in the face-to-face setting.
I'm so glad you said that, as well as you, Dr. Daugherty, because I do think many of you are educational justice leaders at heart, and that the curriculum leadership roles that you all have taken make a huge difference for our principals and for our school teachers when those educators are steeped in the theory and knowledge of who they're really affecting and how some of these things affect them. It's very important. I would also say that you know, we've had some terrific partnerships with each of you all in the past, and I have one more of your colleagues that I recognized on the chat is in, and hopefully Dr. Hackney won't be too shy, and that she will share a couple of words as well as it relates to what do we do next, right? As educational leaders and as a K through 12 system. I can't say enough that your partnerships with Virginia State University has been huge for the community of learners that we serve. And hopefully your community is having a similar impact. But the Wallace Grant that we've been a part of over the last few years with reshaping educational leadership and the principalship is something that we want to continue to work with the principals in your area, as well as you give us information as to how we can help take our particular program to the next level of making sure that all the principals in our community recognize equity at a different level than what they've have in the past, and bring about the kind of difference in your community that you are looking for. And so, Dr. Hackney, are you there? Dr. Bazemore, can you unmute her if she is muted?
I am, and you know I'm never shy. So although I love these colleagues that are on the panel today, and I'm sorry I was late, but I couldn't wait to be able to hear from them and learn from them. We have something really special in this region, and I love all of them. I would tell you, I'm kind of discouraged in one sense, because what I've heard has been some really wonderfully positive outcomes of this incredible, insane time that we find ourselves in. I've not had quite the same experience in Hopewell, and that just means we have different experiences. Our kids and families are struggling so badly. There haven't been too many highlights of this. I will tell you, we've done a lot of empathy interviews with our kids to get a sense from their perspective of how hard or easy, whatever, how this has been for them. And the one blessing that they've told us, which breaks my heart, but it is what it is. The one blessing they have said is we can work and we can help our families. We can help support our families because so many families in Hopewell are struggling to make this work on so many levels, not just education, but all the way around. I will tell you, we in Hopewell have really shifted our focus to what happens when we get them back. And we've also tried to avoid even the conversation around learning recovery. We don't want anybody to feel pressure and to feel worried about that. We're having conversations about normal conversations this time of year about retention and things like that. Our whole theory or theme this year has been love and grace, just giving everybody the grace that they need under these crazy circumstances. So we've moved into a really kind of exciting place where we're just planning for them to come back. We're actually planning, like literally rolling out a red carpet and balloons and signs, how much we've missed them, how much we love them, and no pressure yet to what a year under these circumstances has meant. And taking the pressure off our teachers, our administrators, not just about the things that are out there, the structures that are out there to evaluate us, but those artificial ones that we put on ourselves. We just want them back. We want to love on them, we want to hug them, and we want to say it's all going to be okay, and we'll just figure this out together. It has been a really rough ride for Hopewell. Our kids a third of our kids are failing, and we're not accepting that. That's not good enough, especially when grace has been our overarching agenda. But the vast majority of children in this community aren't doing well with this, in spite of our efforts. So we're putting our energy and our focus into getting them back, and to encourage parents to feel comfortable bringing them back, and then just starting over a new chapter, new year, and what that looks like. Coincidentally, and it has nothing to, it's just a funny coincidence, but we will be rolling out our balanced calendar. We will be moving to year-round schools. That's been a 3-year process. Many of MERV's principals, and Katina, I see you, have helped us immensely with their experiences of Bellwood in particular, in rolling out year-round. We're going to do that just coincidentally as a part of our return to learning after COVID. So excited about that too. But anyway, that's kind of what we're doing in Hopewell. It's been a rough ride, but we couldn't have done it without the help and the support and the wisdom of so many of these panelists and people that are helping us navigate this crazy journey that I don't know about you, but I didn't get any training in. So thank you.
Well, I think that really brings us to the next question, though. But before I ask the next question about our help and how institutions of higher education like Virginia State can assist in what education looks like after the pandemic. Before I ask that question, I just want to say that, so many of our communities are hurting, and I know some of my colleagues know, depending on the community and or the area in their own school division, they kind of spoke on softly as it related to that they know there's a little bit of disjointedness and issues in certain pockets of their areas or their community. We know people that have lost loved ones, lost parents. Of course, we know children that have lost parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles. And each of those children really internalize that loss differently. And that trauma really won't necessarily manifest itself immediately in some of the things that they're doing. But we know that it's going to have to come out sooner or later. Some of them are holding it inside because they don't know what the next shoe to drop is going to look like. And then others are acting out right now and not necessarily getting on Zoom, won't cut on their camera, and are doing some rebellious kinds of things currently. But I think together, we have to, I think, work together and make sure that when school starts back, when we get to some level of normalcy, it's not the normalcy that we were used to prior to COVID, that it has to be something drastically different for our students to be enthusiastic again and for them to really lean in. If it's exactly what it was prior to COVID, I don't think they're going to lean in the same way because they've been exposed to, they've seen behind the curtain now with Zoom and with some of the things that we're doing online. And so the question is, how can higher education institutions, not only Virginia State, because some of my colleagues, of course, at VCU and Old Dominion and other institutions are very much interested in working with our school divisions, even though they can't touch what we do. But what I'm really excited about is how we can work together differently and make sure that every child is really appreciated for who they are and what they bring to the classroom, as opposed to what they scored on a test. My colleagues want to start that conversation first.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So it's a couple of things that you have to look at. The only main benefit that I've seen from this pandemic is people now really fully understand the power of a teacher and the importance of education. Like all the people that really thought that being a teacher specifically was easy, parents quickly found out that is just not the case. And I think hopefully that will really kind of build on the importance of the overall impact of education in society moving forward. Number two, we're very, very thankful for the additional monies that we received. I mean, it's allowed us to do some things in our school division, but it's really a one-time expense. So we know that the overall level of sustainability is something that we're also concerned about, in the school division. And, going back to what Dr. Hackney said, I didn't paint the picture that everything was perfect here in Suffolk, because our broadband issues are tremendous. When Dr. Doherty mentioned the thousands of hotspots that he had to purchase in Chesterfield, we did the same. We had to purchase 1,100 of them. But the problem is, in two of my boroughs, there's one cell tower for two boroughs in the entire city. And Suffolk's actually the largest city in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but it's so rural in so many areas. And so even though we were providing MiFis or hotspots to students, there wasn't anything for them to be able to connect to, especially when it came to, the video itself really taking up a lot of the overall broadband. So that's been a challenge. I mean, we had to open up, exterior Wi-Fi at our buildings, parent access centers. And that's probably one of the main reasons, similar to this session here, that we were recording lessons, because we had to give our students an opportunity and parents to log on later and view it, because they may have actually had to drive to the school and sit in the parking lot to actually view the instructional lesson for the day. So that's probably been one of the main issues that we've had here. And in Suffolk, we've actually seen two extremes. First 9 weeks, I had a lot more Fs as I did compared to this time, last year. I had a lot more A's too. I mean, which is really interesting, was just either or. There was really not a lot, in the middle there. And of course, we began to try to put as much remediation plans in place in order to try to help those kids, because you don't want students to give up. When the scores are that low, it gets to the point where the kids just stop logging in. Then you have to do home visits and still make sure you practice your mitigation strategies and things of that nature, but really getting the people involved. Because parents were basically telling us, I have to go to work. I can't stay home and supervise my child in this virtual environment. So what are you going to do to help support that? And we just try to be as creative as we possibly can and really look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Dr. Petra Martin?
No, it's interesting because I get this question a lot about how has instruction changed in this virtual environment. And I think in some ways, it absolutely has changed with the technology tools that teachers now, are able to use to make their lessons exciting and engaging. But on the other end, I sit back and I think about some of the teacher prep programming that I received when I was going through my teacher prep program, where, the old Madeline Hunter and making sure all of your key components of a lesson are in place, making sure that you have tactile, kinesthetic, auditory, and visual learners in mind, and your activities encompass all of those things. When I watch my pre-K teachers teaching virtually, they do all of those things. And so my question to the teachers have been, am I going to see that when you come back? Because sometimes we were not seeing those things when we were in in-person learning. So in some ways, yes, we have to teach new and differently, but there's tried and true pedagogy that we know how to engage kids. And so I've seen it done very well virtually. And so I've seen it done well in person. My hope is that we just see so much of the things we've seen happen virtually, because we have to keep kids engaged, transition back. We've actually seen some incredible teaching going on virtually because those tried and true things are now happening. So I've seen both. I've seen some of the things we know are just solid and brand new things as well.
Dr. Atkins?
I agree with both of my colleagues. This has just been a time that we're learning so much about what the possibilities in public education, what can go wrong and what can go right. I think with our teachers, it has been, they've been so flexible. It's been a heavy burden on them to make such a transition, and to transition many times from face-to-face to virtual, from face-to-face to virtual, back and forth. One of the things that has come out that has really benefited our teachers is having the opportunity and having Fridays as professional learning time. We do synchronous learning in the mornings on Friday mornings, and then asynchronous, and our teachers and our staff go into professional learning. Dr. Odie, Katina Odie is our chief academic officer, helps to lead some of that along with our principals. But teachers have more time to plan lessons, to talk to their colleagues, to engage with their colleagues. And what I'm hearing is that that in itself is a benefit. Teachers now are learning how to actually have their families and have that professional environment also, to balance those. All of those are so important. Our teacher prep programs now have to make sure that you're looking at how do you develop a teacher to be even more flexible and nimble in their teaching, to go from the face-to-face environment to the virtual environment. What are the connectivities there? What are the threads through each of those approaches to the pedagogy? How do we harness those and make them as a part of the repertoire of a teacher when they come into the classroom? I don't believe with the action that's going on now in the General Assembly, we are not going back to where we used to be, and we should not go back to it. There's a whole new world that's opened up, some good, some bad. We need to learn from this and create the public education system that works for all of our students, not one that works for a certain segment of our population.
I love that, and I think it starts with how we assess learning. If you would, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head, and many of our teachers have said the same thing. And so now it's about us recreating that next tomorrow. Dr. Daugherty?
Yeah, I think, a lot's been said, not to repeat it. What we noticed throughout our entire system was we were able to identify where we had strengths, but also the weaknesses were very glaring. And from our teachers all the way through the superintendent. And one of the things that we were able to do is in our schools with our instructional designers is use our instructional designers to help our staff members work on the areas that they wanted to improve. And I would agree with Dr. Atkins about the point of that once this pandemic is over, education is going to shine greatly because of the unbelievable talent that we have in our classrooms and how they are growing constantly. There's not enough professional development to train them for what they're doing right now. They are collaborating with each other. They are working as teams. They are sharing information like they've never done it before. And they are picking each other up. And I think it's making us a stronger educational community, knowing that I can get better and continue to get better. And when, I'm seeing it when I'm going into classrooms now where I see face-to-face, and just the energy from the teachers in the instructional piece now in the classroom that they had in the virtual world is tremendous. And I just think we're going to continue to move forward. I don't think anybody wants to go back to where they were because they've seen levels that they have reached that they never thought. And and with our young people that are struggling, it excites them because their teachers are so animated about every day they see them to just almost embrace them with knowledge and the opportunity that they want them in the classroom. If anything, not only have our teachers, but our students realize how much they missed each other.
Yeah, and I would also say, if we are as concerned as Dr. Hackney brought up earlier about some of our children, how they are dealing with trauma and the issues that they've had, all of our teachers are internalizing that, right? And that their mental health is not what it was 12 months ago. Their mental health has been probably shaken as well. And we have to, I know we talked about snow days maybe being gone, but mental health days or something for our teachers has to be something that we talk about and deliberate about moving forward so that they can continue to give the kind of assistance and be that boulder of support that they have for our children for the past few years.
Dr. Walter, you had mentioned what can the universities do. I'll speak for all of my colleagues. You could graduate more students in education so they become teachers for us so we could hire them. We would really appreciate that. I think all of us could take, you want to send 20 or 30 to each of us, we would hire them immediately.
We're working on that. We're working on that. I think, as you were saying, cultural competency training, that work, I think has to be something that we talk about as a partnership, especially now in lieu of the new delegates bill that just recently was passed. And we really need to talk about how we can get more male teachers in the classroom. Children, all children, females and males, should be able to see males as educators and role models in the process. We cannot leave out, we're very blessed, especially in this region, with 3 outstanding and more female superintendents, but also seeing our female leaders, right, as principals and in our schools, so that our young students can really aspire to be educators at a different level and at a different rate. And then last but not least, I think when we start talking about our young ladies and STEM, I remember getting into teaching some 30-something years ago. And as a 4th grade teacher, one of my goals was to help some of my young ladies in the classroom really love science and math, because there was stated then that there was a shortage of females in the STEM areas. Here today, 30 years later, we still have some of those same issues, and we need to address those moving forward. Or else we've not done anything in any of the things as an educational justice leader that we have really espoused to do. So I would say all of those are also some things that hopefully we as a institution of higher education can help with and work with you on, as well as I'm very much interested in these virtual academies and growing more of our future teachers from your school divisions, because the one thing we know is if they start in your school division and they love school to the point that they want to go into education, they're very much likely to want to come back to your community to teach. And to work as not only a school teacher, but they have a very good likelihood of becoming a principal or a superintendent in your school division because of their love and appreciation and knowledge of the community. Now, with that, and Dr. Hackney, did you have anything or that you wanted to, I saw you amen, Dr. Atkins' statement. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, sir, I agree. Ditto all of them.
And so we're gonna have time for, I think maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Dr. Bazemore, are there any questions that we can ask the panel?
Well, the questions just started showing up. So the first one says, have you ever considered bringing in one student representative from each school, higher education, to a panel to talk to the division leaders to speak about the hardships of online learning, thoughts on face-to-face versus hybrid, as well as suggestions that they may have for better learning?
Well, I will take that one. I think I already replied in the chat area. I think that's a great idea. I have to get my colleagues to sign back on for that conversation, but I do think that that is one that's worth fielding, that the school division superintendents, especially those that are on this call, would be very excited to hear from either students and or future educators. And their thoughts on those on those platforms, as well as the work that goes around that. Am I speaking too much for you all, colleagues?
I think we give you a thumbs up on that one.
All
Yeah.
right.
Love to hear.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Next question is, which delegate bill were you referencing? Was it Tawana Fortune? I'm assuming that probably was talking about, I think that would have been.
Dr. Atkins, I think,
Yeah.
brought up one.
It was, and I said Senate Bill 1303. I should have said, yeah, 1303, that's correct, is Delegate, is Donovan is the patron on that, and it's local school divisions, virtual and in-person learning. Senate Bill 1303.
And that's Donovan.
Donovan. Yes, Donovan. Dunnabant. Donovan.
Okay. She said, thank you very much. And that's all we have right now in the chat.
Well, I want to thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart. I know we could, is there one more?
One just came through.
Yes.
It's great that you all are putting social emotional learning supports and resources in place for students. Have you implemented or do you plan to implement any social emotional learning supports for teachers and other school personnel?
Great question.
Yeah, I'll take that one. That was something that we actually put into place in November here in Suffolk, because the same anxiety levels that you saw with students, you began to see with staff, especially because we were asking them to do something new. And they also missed their interaction. I mean, one of the positives, another positive, because you got to find the positive because we're all educators, right? One of the positives you did see is kind of what several of my colleagues mentioned, is that interpersonal relationship between teacher and student actually has been magnified. And especially with a lot of us setting up enrichment and remediation sessions and one-on-one things, either at the end of the school day or designating a certain day, if it's Wednesdays or Fridays, has probably been the model that I've probably seen the most throughout the state. That really gave our teachers an opportunity to kind of see our kids in a different light. And it also gave them some more insight into the kids' family structure and background. And, you know, a lot of us were very conscious of, you know, creating digital backgrounds so that students wouldn't be embarrassed from how their living situation is or having other students see it. But it kind of opened up some conversations that normally may not have happened in the classroom. With our teachers, we basically started off with the mental wellness check every 2 weeks. You know, we had our school counselors, some people from our student support services group basically have a Zoom session just like this. And really, you just kind of giving the staff an opportunity to vent. I mean, that's a lot of times just getting it out, especially for other people who are empathetic towards it because they are also experiencing the same things, carried a lot of weight. Then I'll be honest, I actually dug back into my Chesterfield roots and took one of Merv's people and Lisa McCoo, who's a social emotional learning specialist there, and had her do some professional learning, because we saw a lot of the same tendencies and traits that our students were suffering with was also present with our teachers. You know, the feeling of being alone, just missing that social interaction, and just being unsure. I mean, when we flip education upside down like this, there's a level of implementation time period that occurs. And even though accreditation has been waived because we still knew we had to do the assessments, teachers were still feeling that pressure for the accountability piece. And they were worried about that. They were worried about, you know, how is standard 7 going to affect their overall evaluation? So you really had to have some conversations and really get, you know, giving the teachers some flexibility on what assessments they could use for standard 7. It's because you gave them more buy-in and really more input to how they were going to be evaluated. I think that took a lot of tension away. And just continuing to have that conversation throughout the school year, especially since right now, you know, we're all kind of doing mid-year reviews of that nature. This gives us an opportunity to kind of tweak what was going well, what wasn't, what you needed to improve on, and then making sure that the teacher and the administrator had conversations to make sure it was practically being applied in class. So it really was the same when it comes to SEL. And Dr. Walter, that is something that in your new teacher prep programs that I know that V-State is going to develop, that is something that really needs to be a huge component of it. You know, it was classroom management a couple of years ago that we were talking about. Now really having a strong emphasis on the SEL piece, I think is going to carry a lot of weight as well.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here because we have done a lot of work with self-care for our staff. We have self-care Wednesdays, for example. So on Wednesday afternoons of each month, there are self-care activities for our staff led by our self-care team here in the school division. But we also tried to focus on physical wellness as well. So we've had step challenges for all of our schools. Our parent advisory committee is hosting a walk it out session next Thursday where we're all going to be out and walking and FaceTiming each other while we're doing it. So we've tried to tend to mental health, but also physical health at the same time as well.
You know, the issue of trauma-informed care, I think we've all looked at the trauma-informed care of our students and our staff and looking at our social and emotional opportunities of training and helping our each of our schools and even our district office staff. But one of the things that we were able to do was we had a hotline for our families and a hotline for our staff if they were having any issues that they needed to talk to someone. But also we partnered with our county health department, and we were every Friday we put out what's called a Friday family memo, and we keep putting information on contacts from all different avenues of agencies that can help our parents and our students and our staff members. And we do it also with our staff. And it's interesting when you don't think people read something you send out, how we got a lot of feedback on information, not only on our website, but also things that we send out to our parents through Messenger and everything else, about how they took that to heart and started to use this information in a way that surprised me somewhat, that they were actually reading the information we sent out, and it became important to them that they could get help, not only for their child, but for them as well.
Yeah, and I think that parent piece is going to be very important moving forward. Looking at one of the other comments in the chat area, that we have to have some social emotional outlet for some of our parents. But I would also urge all of our listeners, as well as our superintendents, that as much as we can do some of this publicly, nothing changes unless they also do some follow-up privately with a counselor or someone that can really help them through some of these issues that we are seeing, from death to major illnesses, to people battling their own diseases within, and issues with their own immune system, as they have to be very careful around who they talk to and how they socialize now, based on what we've learned from COVID-19. And it does not help in our community, in our state, in the Commonwealth, when we know that now there's a even deadlier strain, a more contagious strain that is right here in the Commonwealth that we have to be careful of. And I hope each and every one of you all are being careful from that respect as well. I am so glad. I think we are at the 5 o'clock mark, and I really appreciate each and every one of you and your comments. We will take the information that's in the chat if there are some additional questions, and we will share them with you. And hopefully get your feedback on some of those questions as well, that we can disperse to the group that we're on today, so that everybody's questions could be answered. As well as, I really appreciate you all pretty much saying from the heart, not a scripted response to those questions, or you being too guarded. I really appreciate you all saying from your heart what you feel and what you're doing in your community and what you're looking out for moving forward. And I truly think of each and every one of you as an educational justice leader, and want to thank each of you from the bottom of my heart and the VSU family for everything that you are doing for your community, for our students, and for our teachers. And so, Dr. Atkins, Dr. Doherty, Dr. Petrie Martin, Dr. Gordon, and of course, Dr. Hackney. I do appreciate each and one of your comments and all that you've shared.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
You.
And this will not be the last, so be expecting another ask from us to bring some other people back to the conversation and meet on some of these issues as we get ready for post-pandemic, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Julius.
Hey, Julius, I'm trying to unmute you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate y'all. Job well done as always.
Hey, Dr. Hawkins, how are you doing?
Julius, how's the new job?
We're rolling. We're having fun. I can tell you. We're coming together as a cohesive unit. We're excited to be able to support many of these superintendents that were on the call today. In fact, I got one of our colleagues still on the call, Lisa Martin. She's one of our federal leads. We're excited to be out on the front lines, trying to pull up the sleeves and do what we do, you know, and it's a little non-traditional, a little unorthodox, but you all know my history. So at the end of the day, if it's going to support the work that our colleagues do in the field, hey, Doc, and if it's going to support students, you know, we're all in. So we appreciate you all continuing to be the hub for support, particularly down in our regions that we primarily focused on. And we're in Region 1, Region 8, and you all are serving those regions quite well. So we're appreciative. You know
Well,
that.
thank you. I didn't even get a chance to boast about what we're doing with special education and with the field clinical, the clinical educator grant. But we'll save that for some other days.
Absolutely.
But I do appreciate you all coming on. And Dr. Martin, I want to know who designed the new quality, the Office of School Quality logo.
Well, it was actually part of our team designed it, and I give full credit to Marvana Bennett, who was working with VDOE and designing, because we know sitting in the center of school quality is the heart, because that is what we're all about. Exactly.
I love it. I love it.
School quality. So it's for our baby. So thank you. Very nice. Thank you for allowing me to join today. Thank you for what you're doing, and look forward to working with you in the future.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you, Dr. Bazemore, for everything.
Absolutely.
Good job. And Dr. Hawkins, are you staying on mute?
No, I'm off mute now.
Hello, Muriel.
Hi, Shelley. Julius.
Shelley, you can stop recording now, though.
Oh, that's a good idea. I forget that I'm recording to begin with.